Alright, with Revit open, we will begin to create and edit the HVAC zones. To start this, go to the Analyze tab, and on the Spaces and Zones panel, select the Zone button to launch the Edit Zone command. By launching the command this way, Revit will place an HVAC zone on the ground level at the lower left of the project. Now, this is not the default zone that all the MEP spaces are currently assigned to, but a new HVAC zone waiting for you to add MEP spaces to. While on the Edit Zone command, we will cover the four main buttons on the active ribbon. They are the Add Space button, the Remove Space button, the Finish Editing Zone button, and the Cancel Editing Zone button. These four buttons do exactly what they imply. The Add Space button allows you to add MEP spaces to your HVAC zone, while the Remove Space button allows you to remove MEP spaces from your HVAC zone. And the Finish Editing Zone button will end the command and retain the changes you have made to the HVAC zone, while the Cancel Editing button will end the command and not retain any of the changes you have made to the HVAC zone. So let's select the Add Space button and begin to add some MEP spaces to our HVAC zone. Now there's multiple ways to add MEP spaces to your HVAC zones. You can select MEP spaces one at a time, or you can window and select multiple MEP spaces at once. As you're adding the MEP spaces, you'll notice that the border of the HVAC zone will begin to encompass the selected MEP spaces. In the event you select an MEP space you did not mean to add to your HVAC zone, just go up to the ribbon, select the Remove Space button, and select the MEP space you want to remove from the HVAC zone. And you'll notice that the HVAC zone border no longer includes that MEP space. Another ability you have while in the Edit Zone command is the capability to go to another view and add MEP spaces from another level to the HVAC zone. To do this feature, just activate the view you want to go to and select the Add Space button on the active ribbon and continue to select the MEP spaces you want to add. Once you've added all the MEP spaces you want to, select the Finish Editing Zone button on the active ribbon and the command will end. To add additional HVAC zones to a Revit model, just select the Zone button on the Spaces and Zones panel and Revit will add another HVAC zone to the model for you to add MEP spaces to. And just like before, select what MEP spaces you want to add to the HVAC zone by either windowing around the MEP spaces or selecting them one at a time. If you need to add or remove MEP spaces from an HVAC zone that has already been placed, what you'll need to do is select the HVAC zone and then select the Edit Zone button on the active ribbon, and this will launch the Edit Zone command without adding a new HVAC zone to the model. Now, as we review the HVAC zone schedule, we'll see that Revit numbers HVAC zones sequentially based on the order they were placed in the model. Though this makes sense to the model, it can prove difficult to keep track of your HVAC zones on a very large project. So a common practice is to rename the HVAC zones to something that makes sense. Usually, you name them after the mechanical equipment that serves them. You can edit the name of your HVAC zone either in the Properties palette while the zone is selected, or in the HVAC zone schedule. In this case, we will name this HVAC zone AHU-100 and this HVAC zone AHU-101. The HVAC zone schedule serves another good purpose, and that is to check whether you have assigned all your MEP spaces to a HVAC zone. And you can do this by seeing if the default HVAC zone's square footage is equal to 0. If it's anything but 0, you have an MEP space still assigned to the default zone. To better understand why it's a good practice to have the default zone square footage ultimately equal 0, let's examine what the default zone is. The default zone is the HVAC zone Revit has permanently embedded in the program, and is the HVAC zone that an MEP space is assigned to when it initially is placed in a model. The default zone cannot be renamed, nor can it be deleted. The default zone just exists in Revit because the MEP spaces must be assigned to an HVAC zone all the time. So since the default zone is the default zone, hence why Revit named it default, it is a good practice not to leave any of your MEP spaces on that HVAC zone, because if you add any further MEP spaces to the model later on in the design, it'll be added to that zone, and you can easily lose track of what MEP spaces go to what HVAC zones. So using an HVAC zone schedule will allow you to see quickly if you have assigned all your MEP spaces to an HVAC zone other than the default zone. And you continue to go back into the model and add your MEP spaces to HVAC zones until the default zone square footage ultimately equals 0 square feet. Another feature in Revit is the ability to assign a color scheme to your model views based on the HVAC zones. Now this feature has no bearing on your load calculations whatsoever, but it will make identifying your HVAC zones easier while you're working in the model. So to use this feature, all you gotta do is select the color scheme button on the properties palette and the edit color scheme dialog box will open. For this view, set the category on the left side of the dialog box to HVAC zones and the color in the main part of the dialog box to the name parameter, and then select OK. And you'll notice that your HVAC zones in your view have now changed colors, and instead of being the same color, they're now two different colors. One thing to note about color schemes, they're view specific, so you have to apply the color scheme to each view you want it associated with. And with that, you've added your HVAC zones to your Revit model and verified that the correct MEP spaces are associated to the appropriate HVAC zones.